Good morning, everyone, and welcome to this morning's special episode of the Maritime Morning Brief. I'm here with Executive Director Patrick Gallagher.
Good morning, everybody.
And today we are here with special guest Ryan Calkins, Commissioner at the Port of Seattle and Advisor at Pacific Northwest National Laboratory.
Good morning. Great to be here.
Thank you so much for coming. So we were discussing things right before we started this, and I think we're just going to have to immediately jump back into it.
Yeah, let's get it out of the way immediately.
You said interpreter on the radio. Please
Your
tell.
first time on the radio. Tell us about that.
Yeah.
So I think I would have been 24 years old, and I'd spent a lot of time living in Latin America, and I was fluent in Spanish, and I was asked to accompany a woman from the Pacific coast of Colombia, which is a really kind of rural, underdeveloped area of Colombia. She was a Afro-Colombian woman who was a human rights activist in Colombia and had been brought to the United States to share her story. And we were doing this whole Great Lakes tour. So for 3 weeks, she and I traveled around the Great Lakes. And we had this opportunity to speak to listeners in the Detroit area. And she did not speak a word of English. Mm-hmm. And so everything had to be, to the extent I could do it, simultaneous translation for her. And there were many spaces in Detroit where I stood out like a sore thumb, I'll tell you that. And this was one of them. But it was an excellent tour with Dahlia. And, you know, we made a lot of connections for her and her community back in Colombia. And it was,
wow.
It was a pretty intense experience for me.
You grew up in Detroit?
No, I'm from right here.
You're from
Edmonds,
right,
Washington,
okay. But you just, okay.
But yeah, I was living in Colombia at the time. And so we flew up together from Bogota to I think we flew into Chicago and then did this.
You're living in Colombia. What were you doing there?
I was a human rights documentarian for 2 years in Colombia.
Wow.
Yeah.
What?
Awesome. That's amazing.
Was that like kind of your first?
In your 20s?
You said, you were younger.
So after college, I went to live in Honduras for a year doing disaster relief.
Wow.
Post Hurricane Mitch. I was sort of did logistics for a nonprofit that was supporting small communities that had been hit hardest by, it was mostly flooding. It wasn't actually the wind of the hurricane that had been damaging. It was the floods that wiped out water systems and homes. And so for a year, I just spent most of the time in rural Honduras and loved the work and wanted to keep going. And there was an opportunity to move to Bogota and kind of go look a little bit more systems approach on that. And, you know, what was causing this, what otherwise would have been a relatively minor disaster in the grand scheme of things was, in fact, deeply impactful to Nicaragua and Honduras at the time. And so I wanted to understand what's going on there, and why is this poverty happening in such a way that people are super vulnerable. And so there was an opportunity in Bogota, and I jumped at it, and to my mom's chagrin, you can imagine, but it was an incredible experience as a 24-year-old.
That is incredible.
So your name's at the end of a documentary then that we can go watch?
No, we weren't filming anything. We were taking oral histories from Colombian campesinos, peasants, peasant farmers who were being impacted by something called Plan Colombia, which was this U.S. effort at drug interdiction. Wow, we are going way off of America.
No.
But yeah, so
it's what we do.
So my job was to just kind of try to tell the stories of these people who were on the, experiencing the tip of the spear on this interdiction effort that ultimately was pointless, did not accomplish anything in terms of reducing the flow of drugs to the United States. Now, 25 years later, we're seeing another incredibly stupid policy on drug interdiction, which is the, shooting boats out of the water with, in most cases, very poor fisher people who have been kind of pulled into this because of desperation and poverty. And once again, we are not addressing the root of the problem, which is people's need to seek out illicit drugs to address whatever thing is happening in their own life. This is a public health crisis, and we're treating it as a criminal issue.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah. No, it's a good point.
But we digress.
Yeah. It's okay. It makes me think about my own experience on the other side of that. I was in the Coast Guard and did a lot of those. We didn't shoot boats out of the water like what is happening now, but I did do a lot of interdiction off the coast of South America and Central America. So I had a lot of time to reflect on exactly what you're talking about, how this happened, why it happens, the amount of money that we spend on it, why it's failing, those types of things. So yes, we do digress, but
Yeah, I
I
mean,
find it interesting that I don't know when that was for you. I don't know how old you are, but you look very young to me. Like you look great.
I'm 49.
Really? Okay.
So it was.
Wow, we would have been down there at a similar moment.
So I went down a month after 9/11, so October of 2001, and I came back in October of 2003. So I was down there for 2 years. Yeah.
Wow. That's interesting. Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. Right on.
Small world.
So let's talk about your work now.
Yeah.
So, I mean, that's a long road. You became a port commissioner, I believe, in 2017.
I was elected in 2017 and took the oath on essentially January 1st, 2018. Yeah.
How's it going?
Great, actually.
Yeah.
I mean, I began this job saying it's the best job I've ever had. I still feel that way. It's a really amazing opportunity to work with incredible people at an institution that does amazing things for our region and get to work on issues that I think are absolutely at the forefront of what we're doing to change the world for the better. Namely, how are we undoing a fossil economy and turning it into a green energy economy that is going to be in part led by ports because we are energy nodes for our economy. And we're looking at ways to transition a workforce in a period of an inflection point in careers, in work. And I think often I've got 3 kids. I think, how do I want to set my kids up for long-term success in their careers? And the industries that the port is engaged in are some of the most stable careers going forward of anything I can think of. And so we have a responsibility at the port to make sure that we're growing that economy for this region and channeling kids in K-12 education towards careers in aviation and maritime and construction and green jobs. And I get to have a front row seat for that. So it's a great job.
What would you say are some of the biggest challenges right now for you?
The biggest challenge starts with a T and ends with a P. And I don't even like to say his name. But, the federal administration is an absolute burr in our saddle in everything we do. And there's no two ways to say it. I mean, whether it's polar opposite understanding of what climate change means for us and how we need to face that, to approaches to trade, to our notion of the role of the United States in the global community. I just could not be more opposed to their values and positions on those things. And so, we're in the resistance right now. We've got to do everything we can to slow down their efforts to undo all of the amazing work of the last 80 years in terms of a rules-based order. We have to maintain the ember of trade with our allies and just do whatever we can to ensure that when these policies are eventually lifted, as they will be, that we'll be ready to take advantage of those new openings. And, quite honestly, I've spent a lot of time communicating to our international partners that we are still here and we are open for business.
Yep.
And yes, there are headwinds right now, but we will get beyond those. And over the long term, our relationships with Canada and Mexico and Korea and Japan and China are critically important to the Pacific Northwest and in particular to our maritime and aviation economies here.
Yeah. You've been, I've seen you appear on other places. You've been very articulately outspoken about the role of tariffs and what it's doing here locally. How would you describe that, where we're at with the trade war and the impact of tariffs that are having here locally?
I would start by saying that I am not an opponent of tariffs per se. I think there is an appropriate use of tariffs. And I think, one of the first things I said on this last April shortly after Liberation Day was that as a tool, they should be thought of as a scalpel, not a sledgehammer. That these should be used to protect infant industries, to ensure that critical national security industries are healthy and robust. But the method in which this administration has employed them is the exact opposite of that. It is blanket tariffs that do not distinguish between allies and adversaries. They are at levels that make no sense in terms of optimization for the U.S. consumer or the U.S. exporter. They seem to be driven much more by what a particular person can get for him and his family in terms of negotiating leverage for a new named hotel or purchase of crypto or something, and not anything to do with the long-term interests of the American people. And so what it means for us concretely in the region right now is that there is a significant reduction in total trans-Pacific trade, and that impacts the Pacific Northwest to a great degree because our ports are discretionary ports. Mm-hmm. There is a endemic amount of trade to serve the needs of the people in the Pacific Northwest, but the vast majority of the cargo we move through the Pacific Northwest originates from or ends up in places outside of here. So, our Midwestern farmers who are growing soy and corn and other commodity goods for export bring it through here. And so when China stopped buying soybeans, they were our biggest export market. When they literally stopped buying soybeans from the United States, those Midwest farmers were hurt by that. Mm-hmm. And a lot of that's not coming back because Brazil stepped into the breach and took up that market. Mm-hmm. Alternatively, when we're bringing in, whether it's cars or electronics or clothing or toys for markets in Chicago and Kansas City and elsewhere, mm-hmm. those markets were also gutted by this policy. So those are going to be hard-fought efforts to bring those things back, and it will take a long time. It's sort of like that notion of trust, that you build up trust over years and years, but you can lose it overnight. I think trade relationships are much the same way.
Well said.
Yeah. I'm, really interested to talk more about the impacts that you're seeing on the farmers. I think that's been, something that maybe people who were really for the tariffs in the beginning are not necessarily seeing on the news. So any stories about that? Also, the position that you play in trying to repair those relationships. I just think that must be really interesting, like on a day-to-day basis, trying to maintain those relationships in a world under a federal government that's trying to smack them down. Like, what does that look like, those interactions?
Well, I think probably the most poignant example of that was a recent gathering that was hosted by the lieutenant governor of the state of Washington, who had brought together the consuls general from Canada and Mexico, as well as a number of key trade partners through an entity that essentially represents the western provinces in Canada and the western states in the United States. And it was a very high-level conversation around what we can do to extend USMCA, the Mexico-Canada-U.S. trade agreement. And so far, we have not been able to get a clear understanding from the federal administration whether they are going to extend that. And so it's putting a great deal of pressure on our business community to try to figure out, are those markets going to be open to us as they have been? Mm-hmm. And agriculture is at the top of the list there. So in that space, the consuls are being, as you can imagine, very polite as the diplomatic tendency. But at the end of the meeting, I felt like it was important to just put the question directly to our own consul general. What is the position of the United States right now on USMCA? And he still would not give a straight answer. Mm. And in response to that, I turned to our allies and said, this is something, we understand the frustration you feel in trying to engage the U.S. with the U.S. businesses. And we understand the work that we need to do on a local level to try to overcome some of that uncertainty that's been created by our own federal administration.
Yeah.
So the things you can control, my perception is that the Port of Seattle is very out ahead of things like green energy transition, alternative fuels. So anything that you at the port level can control, just from watching, it's quite obvious to me that this is a huge priority for the port. Can you talk a little bit more about that? I know you've done work specifically in alternative fuels. I've seen some of the things you've written about sustainability. So I'd love to give you an opportunity to sort of catch us up on that.
Yeah, I mean, I feel like we just talked about some of the bad news, some of the really good news about what's happening right now, and that I will be excited to regale my grandkids with the stories of how we managed to pull this off someday. There is an inexorable move towards green energy globally, and no effort by the current administration to try to hobble green energy is going to work because the economics are sound. And that's true for, what we all sort of think of when we think of green energy, like solar and wind, but it's also true for the development of alternative fuels that will eventually replace fossil fuels in internal combustion engines. And the reason that's important for us in maritime is because our machines run on liquid fuel, and we are not soon going to replace them with electrons, basically. We're going to continue to need those little molecules of liquid to run those big engines. There just simply isn't enough battery storage you could put on a container ship to move it from Seattle to Shanghai, let's say. So how do we do that? How do we create the alternative fuels we need? And that is a big, complex system, but we are continuing to see the cost curve bend downward and the demand for it increase as the rest of the world understands that the costs of not addressing climate change will be significantly greater than continuing with the status quo. So, or than actually instituting these changes. So, right now at the Port of Seattle, we're looking at a number of pathways to powering these vessels with something other than essentially fossil crude. And we've looked at, for instance, green methanol, ammonia, bio-LNG, renewable natural gas, which are essentially methane, and then also looking at ways to mitigate the impact of the existing forms of fossil fuel extraction and use through things like scrubber technology, carbon capture on the vessel, anything we can do. And some of those are transitional and some of them are permanent. But in all cases, it's the dual benefit of reducing greenhouse gas emissions and also local air particulate emissions. So, the Port of Seattle, we think a lot about the impacts of our industrial operations on the communities that we serve. And we know that one of the most concrete things we can do to improve the quality of life for people around ports is to reduce emissions, which is why we are on a tear developing shore power. We've got all 3 cruise berths now with shore power. And we're working to develop shore power at T18. T5 is fully shore power capable, and we'll continue to do that until the entire harbor is electrified for when the vessels are at berth. And then that sort of next big step in putting together the supply, logistics, distribution of sustainable maritime fuels for our customers at the Port of Seattle.
Wow.
That is so very reassuring to hear, like, that even though we're getting a lot of this, pushback in that it's actually still moving forward. That's really nice to hear. And we just heard from our ops manager this morning on cruise that we're expecting to have another record season this year.
Indeed.
So that's exciting with the shore power and all of that.
And then I've also been tracking LNG bunkering. That's due to arrive, I believe, early May. The first LNG bunkering on a cruise ship here at the Port of Seattle through C-SPAN.
That's right.
Yeah, that's exciting as well.
It is. And LNG for us we don't think of it as a transitional fuel. What we do think about is if you learn to use LNG, then it means you have all the systems in place, the safety systems, the bunkering systems, the storage systems for RNG, which is that will be a big step for us. The challenge with LNG is that it has roughly the same greenhouse gas intensity as the current fuels. So it doesn't really get us anywhere on that side of the equation. It does really help in terms of local air particulate emissions.
Okay.
And so, and we think that it will allow us to understand the system that we need to then incorporate more of the RNG.
So systems approach, and it's evolving towards something better.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And another element of this that I think would be kind of interesting to highlight is that the ports along the West Coast are pursuing these strategies together. This is not something that the Port of Seattle can just do on its own because, quite honestly, we're just one gas station along the highway that these vessels use, and so it doesn't work very well if we're the only ones offering it. So we're in constant communication with our partners in San Pedro, in Oakland, to make sure that as we make these decisions, we're doing it in such a way that it's complementary, that really serves the vessel owner's needs.
Yeah.
That's a lot of activity. How do you manage all of that?
Well, I love that it
I like
looks
the pause.
I mean, on the one hand, we have, I think the most important thing is that we have an incredible staff that really does all this work, and the commission just gets to take credit for it. And that's true in every one of these subject matter areas. You know, we've got truly world-class expertise at the Port of Seattle to do this work. Quite honestly, every time I'm going into a meeting, I'm getting talking points from the latest from our expert on electrification of the central waterfront, or maritime fuels, or you name it. We truly have a stable of experts that is the envy of the ports world on these sort of transitional energy questions. And that's a well thought out effort by the commission and executive director Metric to make sure that we are at the forefront of these conversations. We think it actually presents business opportunities for us. And I had that confirmed in a conversation with one of the big four cruise ship companies, who said that we are beginning to look at port selection, home port selection, based on who can bunker these fuels, because we need them. They need them because other jurisdictions are starting to regulate lifetime fuel consumption of these vessels. So even if you're not operating in the European Union, Fuels EU will apply to you. And so even if the U.S. is dragging its feet on this stuff, other places are saying it matters enough. And so now our customers are saying, we need this service from you. So if we can be in the lead on that, it means that we have a competitive advantage over ports that choose not to invest in these things.
Wow.
Absolutely.
Okay. Yeah, I didn't know that. I didn't realize that was happening. I know the IMO, there was some disappointing news earlier. There was a vote earlier this year that I saw, I read about, that sort of sent a shock wave through this community. But I'm not sure where they're at right now in terms of picking it back up and starting to enforce more of this transition to other alternative fuels.
They are slated to meet again in October, November of this year.
Okay.
And they may choose to take the vote at that point. They'll be whipping votes between now and then to see if they have. And it's the vote on the medium-term measures that have been recommended by the Marine Environment Protections Committee, I think, MEPC, of the IMO. And those would be globally enforced. And it looked like it was slated for passage last October.
Right.
And then Marco Rubio got involved and was their scorched earth campaign to end it went so far as to threaten individual diplomats' ability to travel to the United States. And in fact, we've heard that some of them can no longer use their credit cards because they're issued by U.S. banks, and they've been embargoed as if they are, or sanctioned as if they are a Russian oligarch. I mean, it is a crazy level of resistance to this in what many economists will tell you would have been a strategic advantage for the United States, because we produce the fuels that allow for vessels to reach compliance levels. So it could have been an export market for many of our lower carbon intensity fuels. It's a really, we live in an upside down world right now, but hopefully we'll get through it.
I always feel like, what's entering my brain is it's almost like we're at war with math, you know?
Yeah.
That's a good way to describe it.
It's like, yeah, when 2 + 2 = refrigerator, and you're like, well, I don't understand. And it's like, no, it's real. It's getting difficult to absorb all of it. So I can't. That's my position. I can only imagine how you feel in yours. So I'm thinking about, I'm trying to, project some empathy about what your daily life must be like, and having to navigate what used to be pretty predictable and solid and now isn't. I would imagine presents a lot of challenges.
Yeah, I appreciate you saying that, because, basic notions of science and math are critically important to doing a job like this well. You have to accept that the physics isn't going to change just because you don't like it. One area for me that has, over the last decade, has become a real passion of mine is energy.
Mm-hmm.
And it's one of those areas where if somebody had told me at 25, you really need to understand energy, which is kind of this catch-all phrase, but really when I think about it now, I think about it as the oxygen of the economy. Mm. Energy is the indispensable ingredient in every economic activity. Just think of anything that you do, and there is some input of energy in there. Yeah. And so on the one hand, I can understand the argument that some in this administration are making, that we want to make sure that we're taking an all the above energy approach as their line, because we want energy resilience, we want affordability, we want to drive down the cost of energy, whether it's electrons or molecules, as much as we can. I absolutely appreciate that. And I think that's sound economic policy. You do have to factor in the negative externalities, or your math doesn't work out. Mm-hmm. And that's where they seem to be missing it. So they're willing to pay the price of any negative externality of a fossil fuel just to get more energy into the marketplace. Mm-hmm. And that's where I think they're short-sighted. Where they really don't put their money where their mouth is they say that, but then they hamper all sorts of good, clean energy that we could be getting into the marketplace. And that's where I just wish they'd live into their own motto of an all of the above approach. And if we really lean into that, I think we're going to see a really transformative period. And if you want to understand what that looks like, just look at what China is doing right now. Mm-hmm. They are putting more electricity onto their grid every year than the rest of the world combined, from wind and solar. And then they're backing it up with new forms of storage. And it's a strategic advantage, and they know it, because, once you know the math is right, and you don't really have too many more decisions to make, it becomes a lot easier. You just pursue that, and that's what China's doing. And just think of the context of right now, mm-hmm. where we are now in a global oil shock because of hostilities in Iran. And if you own a Tesla, you're laughing all the way to the bank right mm-hmm. now, right? You get to drive by those $5.49 a gallon prices at the gas station and not care. Mm-hmm. That's the position that China has taken, that they are going to extricate themselves. And Norway and mm-hmm. Sweden and other countries that have been thinking about energy resilience in a very serious way for a generation now, and they will sail more smoothly through this because they are not reliant upon that source of energy. Yeah.
So speaking of externalities, what do you think about the war in Iran?
I could not be more opposed to it, honestly. As I've mentioned earlier, I sort of came of age in the era of the Iraq War, mm-hmm. another adventure in the Middle East with unclear goals and putting U.S. blood and treasure on the line for some unspecified notion. This is that, only worse. And I think the misadventure is typified by the tragic bombing of a girls' school. And as I was getting ready this morning, I was thinking about how each of us needs to understand that's our responsibility. We bear that. Every American owns that. And I don't think that's hitting home for most people, but it should. And that when we go to the polls, when we talk to our friends and loved ones, regardless of political party, we need to be thinking about our leadership. And do you want in leadership somebody who would make a decision as callous as that? And I think we're going to spend years unwinding the damage we've done in lost lives, in debt that we will spend years repaying, in rebuilding relationships with countries around the world who have been negatively impacted by this. And all for what? I've heard 20 different explanations from this administration, and none of them make any sense as to justify this. So now we're seeing, unfortunately, I think it's going to probably push us into recession because of the cost of energy, because of what it will mean for logistical hurdles. We were at Trans-Pacific Maritime last week, and which is a gathering of shipping companies and stevedores and marine terminal operators from around the Pacific Rim. And of course, hostilities in Iran dominated the conversations. And a part of it is they're all having to levy surcharges now because of the cost of fuel. They're all trying to figure out how to reposition vessels because they've got ships that are locked up in different places. They've got containers that are stuck in yards that will never get out. So now we've got this logistical problem. We've got this cost problem. And, whatever happens in shipping and logistics translates into higher prices on the grocery store shelves. And so this is recessionary and inflationary. And so I think we're in for a pretty tough time.
Wow.
I wish you were wrong. I really do. But I think you're right. That's it's very. You articulated it very well. You condensed a lot into whatever that was, 40 seconds. So I appreciate that, just the level of thought that you put into these things, and being able to absorb all of that and then bring it here locally into the port, I think is intense. It's a lot, because you're going to be one of the people, obviously, who has to react to it on behalf of this community. That's sort of the job, I guess. We're going to have to make these hard decisions on our long-range future in a time where it is not going well. I mean, what we do here is we track ships and cargo, and we can see it. It just the math doesn't math. So I believe you in that sort of your conclusions with all of these world events and how it's coming together here for us locally. I wonder about like what we can do. You know what I mean? We as the community, like what sort of guidance or advice would you give us, all of these thousands of people along the waterfront who are, trying to get through what is, I think, undeniably a tough period. What do we do? And maybe that's kind of a big question, but I feel like you've probably thought about it.
Yeah, I think if I had to distill down to one thing that I would hope all of us would push to reform, it would be this imbalance of the three branches of the federal government. That we did not establish this republic as with an imperial president, and yet that's what's happening right now. And the fact that historically the president has been a relatively less powerful head of state compared to other countries is an enormous attribute for us. It means that there is a stability of governance that creates for ideal economic conditions in a lot of instances. When you talk to business communities, business leaders about what they need for long-term success, invariably one of the top attributes is stability. I need to know what my market is going to look like in 3 months from now, a year from now, 5 years from now. And when a single person can radically alter your business landscape on a whim with a tweet, that creates uninvestable instability, essentially. I'm coining words here, but, so what we hear consistently is we're just going to have to wait and see, meaning we're not hiring new folks, we're not building new buildings, we're not buying new ships. And a part of that is because the federal government pivots on a dime on too many issues. And when Congress does its job and the courts do their job, it serves as a stabilizing mechanism for big policy change. And so it is frustrating as all get out. When you want some big policy done and you have to wait for the glacial process of Congress, and yet that very slow-moving approach in the federal government is what makes us so, has led to so much prosperity for so long. So we got to get back to that. So what can we all do in that? Insist that our members of Congress do their job, serve as a check and balance on the president. And I do think, it's going to take whoever comes next as president willing to say, I will sign a bill that constrains my powers.
Yeah.
And I think that needs to happen. We should push for that. It should be pretty high on the list of things that need to happen at the political level.
Yeah. Oh, thanks. Thanks for that. We started out when you came in here, you said you're really busy, which I believe you. So what's coming up?
Well, we have a pretty exciting year at the port. So I'll kind of share a bit about what the port is working on this year. At the airport, we've got a number of capital improvement projects that, for those of you traveling through SEA, you see lots of construction walls right now. They're starting to come down as we get ready for hosting the World Cup in June. So we've got kind of a hard deadline to get all those things done.
No big deal.
Yeah. So while not strictly maritime related, I know for most of us that is something that it's part of our regular lives is to go to the airport and pick up loved ones or fly to Disneyland or whatever it is we're going to go to SEA for. But so we're major upgrades at SEA, and those projects are on schedule, and it's really exciting to go and see the improvements that are happening there. We are also working hard to activate terminals 30 and 46 on the East Waterway.
All right.
No, I can't break any news today.
I wasn't going to say anything.
But one of the things, and this is my opinion, I'm not speaking as the institution, but one of the things that I've really been pushing among the leadership at the port is that we need to take a broad view of the maritime uses for those facilities. That we are entering into. We've just completed T5, and T18 is humming, and so we have amazing container cargo service capability. And we're actually improving those still. I mean, we just added a bunch of new reefer plugs on T5. We improved the gatehouse at T5 so that we can increase throughput. So we've got a ton of capacity there. We can grow a lot there. And what we want to be thinking about is how do we make sure that T30 and T46 serve additional needs so that we've got a broader portfolio of services that we can offer in the port, whether that's break bulk or some of this energy cargo we're talking about. We've been doing a lot of ro-ro work at 46.
I saw that.
And so, as things begin to bounce back eventually, we're ready. And we do take the long view at the port. We understand that, we're probably in a little bit of a lull right now. But when you look at our 115-year history, we go through ups and downs. But ultimately, we are vital infrastructure for shipping. And in the long term, I'm quite bullish on the maritime economy. I think we're going to... A part of taking climate action is to move more stuff by water and less by road, less by rail. We are so much more efficient than any other mode for moving things. And so I think as we take more seriously the green energy economy, we're going to say, let's put things on barges and vessels instead of 450 semi-trucks driving up and down I-5. Why don't we take it by barge? So I think there's going to be a lot of that work that we'll pick up. And then the area that staff at the port, they roll their eyes when I say it, but I am keenly interested in reinvigorating shipbuilding capacity in the Pacific Northwest, and both for repair and maintenance work and for reinvigoration of our fleets. We all know the story of the Washington State ferries. We want to win the next round of bids here in Washington, but we've also got catcher processor fleet that is really up for renewal. We've got interest in expanding the Mosquito fleet again. We build those ships already here. We built passenger ferries for the Bay Area and for LA here. We want to build some for the Puget Sound. All of that work is going to take significant investments in our shipyards, small, medium, and large. And it's one area where we are in agreement with the federal government.
Right.
This focus on the maritime industrial base and reinvigorating it. Right now, we're working with our delegation to hone some policy ideas that would be most effective in supporting our private shipyards in particular, and also understanding how our private shipyards can work in tandem with the big public shipyard, the Puget Sound Naval Shipyard, that I think employs something like 15,000 workers over in Bremerton.
Yeah.
This is an ecosystem, and if we do it right, they'll really complement each other and help to strengthen the workforce of welders and machinists and plumbers and pipe fitters and sheet metal workers, and of course all of the vessel operators who will be needed to serve these. So in that sense, I'm extremely optimistic about our Puget Sound maritime future, but we really do need significant investments in the infrastructure to be able to get there. And one of the most important investments we can make right now is K-12 education. And there is a slow but steady change in the thinking around K-12 education, away from this college for all mindset and towards a careers for all mindset. And when I think about my own kids, I want to make sure that they are getting exposed to the skilled trades, to service work, to jobs other than sitting behind a desk at a laptop. Not to disparage my job, which is mostly behind a desk with a laptop. But when I think about the kind of work that is stable, provides a living wage career, you're not 24 and hugely indebted with college loan payments, the maritime industry offers a ton of those positions, and they are meaningful and interesting work. And so, and in the Puget Sound region, we are on third base already when it comes to expanding shipyard capacity. So that's a passion of mine, and I'm excited to keep working on it with folks at the state and federal level to make sure that we're getting some of those investments that will help to reinvigorate that industry.
Awesome.
One of my most fun questions I always like to ask when people come in and talk about workforce development, because I like to think that we have some young people that listen to the podcast, jobs that you come into contact with that you know of that happen here that people might not think of.
Well, the first one that popped into my mind is naval architect.
Yeah.
So we have arguably three of the best naval architecture firms in the world centered right here in Seattle. I mean, we have this amazing brain trust, Elliott Bay Design Group, Gloston, and I'm thinking the Crowley Engineering Team, which is here in Seattle. And I'm sorry if I've missed others. Shoot me a note and I'll include you next time I talk about it. But they are doing cutting edge work on new vessel types, on both steel and aluminum hulls, private, gray hull, you name it. They are doing incredible work. And so, yes, I think that would be one of the careers I would absolutely highlight. For my daughter's sake, I would say marine biologist. We need a lot of folks who understand our maritime ecosystem, who are able to help us both with remediation of past wrongs that we've done and need to fix up, but also how do we develop this shoreside infrastructure that we need for ports and for shipyards in a way that doesn't hurt the ecology of the area too. We need experts in that, and those are great. And then one of my favorite examples of a workforce around here that's been around since, I want to say 1914. He's going to kill me when I mess that up. But Lake Union Dry Dock Company on the south end of Lake Union, Hobie Stebbins, his daughter Anna, who's an engineer. They are the fourth and fifth generation, I think, of Lake Union Dry Dock Company, this stalwart, 100+ employee company that does a ton of repair and maintenance work for the Coast Guard, for NOAA, for UW, for the Navy, and they are champions for maritime. And I'm proud to say they're going to take my 16-year-old son under their wing this summer and let him work there and give him. And this is, for me, living into what I encourage everyone else to do is you got to get kids in front of these jobs so that they can see what it really means to work in maritime.
Absolutely.
Oh,
So fun. Some marine biologist on the up and up. When I was in school, they made a joke of it. Marine biology. Never going to get a job. No, we need them.
yeah.
Do the marine biology.
Yeah, we employ a few at the port.
There you go.
So how can someone get a hold of you?
Oh, the easiest way to get a hold of me is just email. I actually do read every email that comes in. Yeah, I don't get flooded, but it's just calkins.r@portseattle.org, or you can just go to the website and look up the commission page and find me there too. And yeah, I mean, I sometimes refer to the commission as the Port of Seattle complaint line. You're more than welcome to, if you've got an issue with the Port of Seattle, send it directly to us and we'll make sure it gets to the right person. But also, send us your great ideas too, and reach out if we can come and do a presentation to your classroom, to your workplace, to your civic group. We want to get out there and make sure that folks know what the port does in their community too. So, yeah.
Oh, thank
There
you.
you go.
Yeah.
I have a question on that. I mean, we have like the World Cup coming up, obviously. Are we doing anything like the port, maritime? Are we like posting up and doing anything special for that to highlight it to, everyone coming?
The biggest thing the Port of Seattle is doing to get ready for World Cup is everything at the airport. So we're aside from all the capital improvement stuff, we're going to be doing a bunch of welcoming things at the airport. So when delegations come off planes, that they're going to be welcomed in a way that we want their first impression of Seattle to be amazing. So we're leaning into that. But also along the waterfront, we're helping to host a bunch of parties that viewing parties and celebrations and other things with our partners at Friends of the Waterfront. So
amazing.
Yeah.
That's kind of what I was thinking. Like, see if we're doing anything like that. Feels like a good time to, get together. We're all going to be on the waterfront anyway.
Yeah.
I think we can close out by I just want to say thank you, number one, for being here and giving us the gift of your time. I know it's very precious. I've been trying to do this for a while. So thank you for your flexibility and just being so candid with us and answering our questions. I think that's a really big deal. Number two, not as big as the World Cup, but very, very close, is the National Harbor Safety Conference.
Yes.
And which was supported by the Port of Seattle.
Yeah.
Which we could not have done without that critical support. So
I'm so glad that we get to host it here in Seattle and that the
so
port
cool.
gets to support it. And
again, thank you so much.
well, thank you guys for the invitation to come and share with you guys a little bit. And I, long-time listener, first-time caller, so really fun to get to be on the show.
Eventually, we'll get through the entire commission.
So
we're getting closer.
Yeah, good.
So,
good.
yeah.
It's a good get to know you sesh,
Yeah. Well, and with you here now, that puts pressure on everyone else.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
so thank you so much.
If somebody's reluctant, you tell me and I'll tell you.
I appreciate it.
Things get done here. All right. Well, thank you for joining us again. As Patrick said, it's always really nice to be able to welcome anyone and everyone into our office. It's always special to have people show up here physically. And I think we're going to close out this episode of the Maritime Morning Brief. I think you can also be found on LinkedIn. Yes, if people want to keep up with you there.
Yep.
Fantastic. Well, with that, we're going to sign off and look forward to seeing you all again bright and early tomorrow morning.